I've taken over 1,000 photos and videos with this Chinese smartphone camera, and all it's done is make me sad that we don't have this kind of thing over here in the West from Samsung, Apple, or even Google, at least at the moment. Let me tell you why and how this weird, obscure smartphone has found its way into my heart as my very favourite camera, let alone a smartphone one. So what makes this smartphone different to other setups? Well, aside from the huge dinner plate on the back, that will surely dissuade a whole heap of different people, it's the hardware and tech inside that ginormous camera circle that sets it apart. Here's some context to how these things stack up compared to the more popular Western flagship smartphones over here. And it's pretty obvious at the start that the base for this immense camera is its huge sensors. This is the Vivo X100 Ultra, by the way, not the newest or the highest end on the market, but one that has the craziest setup. The X200 Pro is more readily available and has that crazy telephoto too, but since it doesn't have the 1-inch type main sensor, it's not my favourite, and that's okay. By the way, it would be great if you could like and subscribe. Cheers guys. And it's not just in the hardware that this camera excels. The software has some super cool tricks too. Sure, it has log recording like an iPhone, but not sure it can really compete with that on the highest end compared to that device. It has a huge array of modes, from portrait video with background blur, an astrophotography mode, a high resolution mode for bypassing pixel binning, super macro mode which captures some really interesting looking close-ups, pro modes with manual controls including log recording, and a portrait stills mode that might be the best I've ever come across. It switches those multiplier buttons at the bottom into focal lengths, lets you adjust the virtual aperture from f16 all the way to f0.95, and then offers you different lens simulations for bokeh that can create different character in your images by mimicking unique and popular lenses from that Zeiss branding. This might be one of the standout features of this camera, to be totally honest. It doesn't just blur out the background, but it lets you take photos that look like actual photos from bigger cameras. Not the sort of thing that a smartphone would usually capture. And it works not only with these big old cameras on the back, but the selfie camera as well. I love this feature. It's a proper callback to what Huawei was doing in its prime, and I'm all here for it. You can pick between 3 colour modes on this camera app. There's vivid, there's textured, and of course Zeiss branded natural. They're all slightly different, and I personally stuck with the Zeiss natural for the vast majority of the photos I've taken with this phone, because for me it just looks the best, but I'm glad we have a choice here. And I love what's often referred to as the look of this camera system. It really is natural, it's less artificial looking in most scenarios. Sure, it's not perfect, but it hits more than it misses. I've said before that I shoot the majority of my smartphone images with the telephoto lens on my OnePlus because it's a 3x, so it's a nice sensor, a nice lens combination, and this is a very similar story, but it takes things to a whole other level. The 3.7x f2.7 periscope lens, combined with a 200 megapixel 1/1.4 inch sensor, is simply a league above what we have in Western smartphones. I believe Honor does a very similar thing, and I might have to look at one of those phones soon, but for now these are the shots I have from this thing. The first thing you'll notice is that a lot of the time you really don't need portrait mode to get a shallow depth of field, because the telephoto sensor in this smartphone is actually as big as, sometimes bigger than, the main camera sensors you'll find in Western smartphones. All you have to do is open up the telephoto, snap the shot, and you get some pretty effortless background blur. This also means it works well in video without the need for sort of jarring pro cinematic video looking stuff. I love shooting with the long lens on here. Once you crack 10 times and go beyond, it can get a little bit artificial looking, I'd say, with some of that AI fluff that I really don't love. This seems to be the case with a lot of different smartphones at the moment, where you'll just see things look like watercolor paintings just so the images don't look overly soft, and I'm just not a massive fan of that. It's not the end of the world, and there's only so much you can expect from a smartphone with a periscope that goes up to 240mm, but beyond that, yeah, the X100 Ultra shots just don't look great. But for anything below that, this is one of my favourite cameras on a smartphone, if not my favourite. And I'm not really sure where this started, but I love the ability to select different focal lengths in the camera app. This is something that has been on many smartphones. I think maybe Apple started this, but I'm not entirely sure. And I shot a lot of my images at 35mm because of this. And the main sensor, since it's just so huge, allows for a bit of a crop and not really missing much in terms of quality. You're certainly not getting super close up with that 1-inch sensor, by the way, since the way these things are made, you kind of need to allow for a bit of distance from the front of the lens, but you still get that wonderful f1.8 aperture for really blurry backgrounds, which I know many will love. This combined with portrait modes and video modes might be the best main camera sensor I've ever tried. It's certainly my favourite. And though my love for ultra-wide cameras and images has waned in recent years, the 50 megapixel half-inch sensor is still very good in this phone. It might be my least favourite of all of these cameras, but having the options go nice and wide where I need it is something I just wouldn't have on a standard point-and-shoot camera, because those lenses tend to start about 24mm, and this is closer to 16 to 18. And it has those lovely Zeiss branded colours as well, so it's not like it's a completely different camera. I want to talk about video. I've spoken at length about the ProRes log video that Apple offers, and to be honest, that still might be the best smartphone video for me. I love it, combined with the filter case that I have and the Blackmagic app, it just shoots some phenomenal stuff. But since most of what I'm capturing is still photography, this is a small piece of the puzzle for me. The X100 Ultra can actually shoot 4K Ultra HD at 120 FPS across its main and telephoto cameras, which is pretty handy to have actually. The 8K mode is reserved for the main camera sensor and is up to 30p, but I very rarely touch this because, as I've said in other videos, I just really don't need that level of resolution. Maybe the worst thing about the video here is that you can't shoot 24p footage in the regular mode, which some might want to use to match their timeline resolution, and actually what you have to do is enter the cinematic portrait and then disable the effects, or use the pro mode and enter video to get that 24p from this camera. This definitely isn't the best video you can capture on a smartphone, but it's up there with the best in my opinion, maybe a top 5, something like that. It's sharp, it's natural looking, and generally does less of that crazy overdone HDR that many smartphone cameras do in video, which adds more dynamic range but at the cost of good looking imagery if you ask me. This has a nice balance to it. A month or so ago I was seriously considering picking up a Sony RX100 point and shoot, and though that certainly has its place and is something I'm still sort of considering to be quite honest, the convenience of having this in my phone that's always in my pocket is just another level. The fact the lens goes further and wider as well, I'm far more inclined to pick up my phone and take a photo compared to using a dedicated camera, especially in poor weather conditions, where this is IP rated and, well, those small point and shoots, you got to be careful with them. As a result, I took over 1,000 photos without actually meaning to. It's probably worth noting that I have not been paid to talk about this. I haven't also been sent this, I paid for this with my own money, and not that it would dissuade me or completely sway my opinions, because I have years of experience doing this kind of thing, being sent products from all different companies. It really doesn't make a difference. Those who say, well, my review must be the best because I bought it, are just talking absolute nonsense if you ask me. Either way, this is a camera nerd thing, and I'm a bit of a camera nerd. I love smartphone cameras because they're just so convenient. This might be the best one right now. If you have a favourite smartphone camera and your opinion differs to mine, that's absolutely fine and welcomed actually. It would be seriously boring if everyone liked the same thing. And let me know what yours is and why in the comment section. There is no shortage of truly excellent pocket photography powerhouses out there at the moment.